When the folks got married, I think Dad had a car, but they would leave it over at Granddad's in the granary, and then they'd ride a pony across over the hill and put it in the barn. And Dad would, when he taught school, he would ride a horse. But as far as I can remember, they always had a car. And Granddad had the Model T, and I don't know when he got it. But there were still a lot of people, I guess, that used the buggies. But as far as I can remember, they first had this car, and the car that I remember the most is it was before Joanne was born, so we were still living in the city, and we'd gone to the fair, and on the fair, the pavilion underneath the stairs on the grandstand, half of it was exhibits for the 4-H or anybody wanted to exhibit or anything they did. The other half was kind of a car show, and the dealers in town would bring their cars out, and their salesmen, of course. Well, the last night of the fair, Dad hadn't told us kids, but anyhow, he said when we got down the pavilion, he said, "Well, come this way," and so we did. And he had bought a new, either a Plymouth or a Dodge. It had to be one of them two. And he said, "This is your new car," and it was pretty cool. I can remember Marguerite and Betty and I sat in the back seat driving out of that floor show. Well, it was quite a thrill. His other car, he'd been caught in the dust storms too many times, and it had ruined the motor, and he was having a lot of trouble with it. Anyway, that was his excuse. And he said, after you buy your first car, well, then the next year or 2 years, and he traded cars about every 2 years. Well, he said, it's better to buy a new car because it beats the upkeep on the old one. Well, we always kept our cars for 15, 20 years, but Dad had a new one. Take a little bit about Grandpa and his car. When he'd bring Grandma over on what she called wash day, she did her washing over there. And Grandma in the laundry would be in the back seat, and Granddad and his dog in the front seat. She never did ride in that car in the front seat. But anyway, Granddad would bring her over, and they'd do the laundry, and then come get her and take her home. Well, Granddad drove wherever he went. He drove this car, and it was top heavy. But he kind of, when he drive down the road, when he got to the corner, well, he'd always speed up, and he'd turn the corner too short, and the car would upset. Maybe that's where you kids learn to speed up at corners. But anyhow, he upset this car at least twice, I know, turning corners. And so far, it'd just go on its side, and he could crawl out, and he'd stand there by his car till somebody come along to help him up, turn it back up, and he'd get in the car and go on his way or go home. That's usually when he upset it. And one day, the neighbor called, and Granddad, they just put in gravel on the new road, and I guess he got too close, and he tipped over, and not on the side that usually does, on the other side. And the neighbor called Dad and told him, he said, your dad upset his car, and he said, he's kind of standing by it, and he said, I can't set it up by myself. So Dad and Mother went down, and I don't know how Granddad had done it, but he'd got the window down somewhere, and there he was, halfway out the window, just enjoying himself, just waiting. And the neighbors stayed talking to him, so Dad and helped him get it set up. And I think that was the last time that he ever drove that car. I do know that the last time he ever got his driver's license was in Canorado, and there were no corners or no hills. So Granddad could just go right down the street and had no trouble getting a driver's license. Well, I didn't mention when he came home from church on Sunday, there was a big steep hill about 5 or 6 miles out of Goodland. And how Granddad got to the top of it, I don't know. He must have got up speed to get up there. But coming home, I guess and knowing him, I think he probably did it on purpose. But he wouldn't use his brake, and he'd start down that hill. And by the time he got to the bottom, I guess he was almost flying. But he never did wreck on doing that. And the Model T sat in the shed for several years, and then when Marguerite and Jay got married, why, either he or Grandma or gave it to Marguerite and Jay, and Jay cut the top of it off, kind of made him a convertible, but it wasn't top heavy anymore, and it did go pretty fast for the cars. Okay, going back to clothes for just a little bit, I wanted to talk about the mini skirts. Now, if you look up at statistics, they're going to say they become popular in 1960, but I know they were here in 1946 because the teacher that I rode out to Rulton to school with wore mini skirts and mini dresses, and they were short. Mother dresses were just a little below the knees, and us girls had below our knees, and us girls were maybe a little bit above the knee, but no shorts, no short dresses, and shorts were not seen on the street yet at this time. And I don't know when they did become popular. And then about the hats, and I said that Grandma made sunbonnets for us. Mother always wore a sunbonnet, but us girls weren't too good about wearing the sunbonnets. And men, they always wore hats, and if you see a man and meet a couple, he would shake hands with the man and tip his hat to the lady. And I don't think I ever had a hat tipped to me, but they done that. And then wherever, any place we went to dress up or anything, we wore hats. And the men always wore them, and the boys wore caps. And if they went in a building or anywhere, the men took the caps off, and hats off. We went to church. We were expected to wear hats or some kind of a head covering. And I don't know when we were allowed to go uncovered, our head uncovered when we went to church. But when I taught school, I always, even after the boys were wearing the caps all the time, I always wanted them to take their hats off. And if they knew me very well, even the upper grades, they'd take their hats off and come in and put them on the corner of their desk. And I never, ever had any complaints. And one time, another substitute was there, and she said, "You know, there's no dress code anymore, and the boys can wear their hats, and you can't say anything about it." And I told her, "Well, I don't know that rule." And the boys always took their hats off, put them on the corner of their desk, and there was only one I can remember complained that he said, "My teacher don't make us take our hats off." And I said, "I'm your teacher today." And he put the hat on the corner of the desk, and after that, every time they came in, they wore their hats. And my grandkids, the boys, they took their hats off before they come in. And whenever a new boyfriend come, I tell them, I have one rule: when you come in, your cap comes off. Well, one day, Ryan come over and he wore his hat in. I said, what's this with the hat? He said, well, I'm having a bad hair day. I said, there's a comb and brush in the bathroom. The hat came off. And once in a while they don't take their hats off, and I don't say anything anymore, but they always took their hats off.
My heart beat fast as I came through the door. For in your Easter bonnet, with all the frills upon it, you'll be the grandest fellow